Under what circumstances does it make sense to use Open edX with Blackboard or replace Blackboard?
Well, maybe I'll take that to start with, since I sort of referenced Blackboard at the beginning. So we at GW used Open edX, I would say, neither to replace or with it exactly. We used it alongside of. So our MOOC platform was done separately outside of Blackboard, but it is available on the GW website, and that's done in Open edX. Then we have other courses, online courses, that we do on the Blackboard platform. I'm not sure that's so ideal. That just happened to be how we created it. I think you could easily start, if you were using the Blackboard Learning Management System, you could start in Blackboard and have all of the integration with your registrar system and so forth, and then be in a course and click and get into the Open edX platform. That would be fine also. I think long term, had I stayed in this position at GW, I would be pushing to see whether we could use Open edX over time to slowly replace Blackboard. But I think you could do any of the three.
Why do you think it would take time? Like, why can't you do that?
Well, okay, what does Blackboard do that Open edX doesn't? So I'd have to look a little bit more, because we haven't really looked into it, but I don't know how well yet it would integrate seamlessly into Banner or PeopleSoft to kind of download student information and things like that. We'd have to work, if I were doing that at GW, I would work with IBL and Michael, and I would work with the Open edX team to see how we could do that. I think it's something that should be looked into, and I think we could talk about it. It's more those kinds of systems integrations. I think all the education side wouldn't be that hard. It's more the systems side that would be harder. And as Lorena sort of called out, the other thing is change at any institution takes a little while, so you would have a little bit of a cycle of change. If we were to move, it would sort of take, at least at GW, it would take a year or a year and a half to slowly integrate and socialize the change. But that's not a technological issue, that's a cultural issue.
The distinction, I think you started to hint at it, but I think it's really, the Open edX platform is geared towards open courses. It's geared towards open enrollment and those sorts of things. It doesn't have strong concepts of, like the management side. Lorena said, the management is the piece that it's not aiming to solve. It's focused on the teaching, the learning, and the openness. So that's I don't think from a product perspective, that's not something that the product itself, the platform itself, is going to support directly. It's going to be through the community building those integrations and solutions providers doing those pieces, because we really want to focus the Open edX product itself on that course authoring experience, that student experience, and make sure that that's what we're focused on, laser focused, and that's what we're really hitting.
And I would just add to that, McKinsey Academy struggled with a similar challenge, and wound up having the flexibility through Open edX to sort of build our own user management tools, and it was a large undertaking, but works.
Maybe to change your question a little bit, to think about the values of your organization. Is it important that it be an open source product? And B, the other part is the hosted versus not hosted. I think those are two big issues. And a lot of people who ask that question don't ask it with Canvas. Canvas is now being used in many universities, so it's Canvas and Open edX rather than Open edX and Blackboard. And again, it's just a matter of where do you sit on those two sides, hosted versus not, and open source versus commercial?
And I can add one last thing, so it's a multifaceted question. There's also a different learning experience in the two platforms. Many of the older platforms for learning, including the first version of the Coursera platform, divides the content by sort of a classification that usually goes by lectures. In the case of actual Coursera, had lectures, the word lectures. If you didn't have lectures in your course, it didn't fit in there, the way that the platform worked. Videos, maybe, assessments, quizzes, discussion board. You'd have a navigation where everything is separated by those different categories. The Open edX platform is not designed that way. It's designed with the concept of learning sequences. So you have the course structure in sections and subsections, and your navigation is linear through that structure. Of course, you can jump around, but it's evident to the user the content continuity. And then within each subsection, you have a learning sequence where if you investigate the platform enough or see other courses, you start getting the feel for how a learning sequence is designed with different components and assessments to be a manageable unit for learning in a session, perhaps, or within a day, or within some reasonable unit. So it's a completely different learning experience. I have taken some MOOCs in Coursera, the original platform, and I found myself jumping from a video to an assessment, and then back, and then to a discussion, and I hated it. It was a bad user experience. And Blackboard is like that, and most of the other systems are like that.
And if anyone wanted to explore how you could turn Open edX and start dealing with some of these systems problems and actually think about using it as a real replacement, that's actually something I would very much love to work with people on, and work with Michael to help design how we could make that happen. Because I think if you were convinced by the pedagogical issues that were just talked about, we shouldn't let the systems issues determine our educational objectives. It should be the other way around. Okay, other questions, comments?
Make one quick comment to her question. I spoke with Harvard X several weeks ago, and I don't know if people know, but again, being a major component of edX, and Harvard X said that they were going to stay with Canvas locally, internally, residentially, and so it's the edX plus Canvas as opposed to replacing it. But there might be people here from Harvard who can speak about that.
I was going to say, that's up to them. I wouldn't do that, but yeah.
Right. So I mean, I can't speak to Harvard's overall strategy, but they were the primary contributor of the LTI provider integration. That's a recent addition to the open source platform that allows you to embed Open edX content in any tool that supports LTI, and that's actually sort of where they're going, was actually, building the content in the Open edX platform and then using the management features of Canvas. It's a mixed approach that they're looking at, as I understand.
I'll give you the business perspective, considering that you are a company. I would say that in the long term, you are not interested in having a lock system. You are interested in having an open source. Software must be open, for sure, and you want to have full control. That's number one. Number two, I would say that for now, we are not ready to replace on Canvas to take or Canvas or Blackboard. We are doing well what we are doing well. We are providing a great user experience, and our view is for now to put Open edX inside your ecosystem, obviously through a single sign-on and everything. And when the times arrive, because we are not ready for the Student Information Service, we are not ready for the Gradebook, but all these things are coming. So in the long term, I don't think that you want to be on Blackboard or even on Canvas, which is not a real open source. And in terms of Sakai and Desire to Learn and others, it's pretty much the same.
Hi. So for novice course builders, talk about the experience as far as managing content and performing actual content authoring.
Okay, who wants to talk about content?
So your question is perhaps what are the tips or stumbling blocks for a novice course author who wants to use Open edX to create a course and put it out there. Is that correct? Well, it's really not that hard. Let me give you an example. I created a screencast, okay? So I recorded a little explanation of something for my course where I recorded with a graphic tablet. So of course you have to be technically savvy to start with. If you're already scared about doing a screencast on a graphic tablet, well, you got some other steps to go through in terms of creating content itself, creating a little video, doing a screencast, recording some audio on your computer, and then clipping in, so things like that. You know, you have to have some skills to do those things if you want to do them yourself without the help of a tech person. But once you know that, on Open edX, the experience is absolutely seamless. So you click a green button to add the content, and you get a template to add the video. I put the video on, just the URL of the YouTube uploaded video, and it was done. Now next, I wanted to have transcripts done so that this video would be accessible. The Office of Accessibility in my university created the transcripts of my video, and they sent me back a file, an SRT file. I've never seen an SRT file. What is, for me, the first time experience, an SRT file? So I'm looking at this thing. I can't open it with any appliance, with an application. So I went back to my Open edX course, and I pulled my video and clicked on it, edit, and it said, upload your transcripts, and I, selected my SRT file, which I couldn't open, and I don't know what it is, and boom, the video was immediately integrated with the transcripts and timed so that you can click on a sentence and the video jumps to that section that you just clicked. So it was absolutely seamless, and many experiences I had were like that. I had other experiences where it was really painful, for example, for me to discover how to do an internal link so that in a content I can select a piece of, it was very easy and intuitive to create a link outside to a URL, but internally I had to find in the documentation that you actually have to /jump to/ and a hash that I didn't initially know. Well, then you have to dig through the documentation and eventually you find it. So they're like learning in every platform, those experiences, but there were more of the experiences where it was intuitive than the other kind.
So McKinsey Academy spends a lot of time on our course production. As Lorena said, a lot of the basics of authoring a course through Studio, super simple, very intuitive. Even if there is any sort of, hey, this is the first time I've run into this thing, it's easily solvable. I think where, and Joel, you might be able to speak to this, where McKinsey Academy is looking to make our process more efficient is with some of those X blocks that we've developed and that other members of the community have developed. We have some X blocks that are impossible to author unless you know 15 different obscure languages and are blonde and, had a particular thing for breakfast. That makes it really hard to onboard new course authors and operations team members. Many of those changes were changes that were made in the heat of launching and developing new things and getting them out there. I think, from a product perspective, we've been much more cautious, especially as we consider donating them back, diagnostic feedback, for example. The authoring experience for that is possibly one of the most intuitive things you will find on Open edX once it gets there. It's amazing. And so I think as a community, people need to be really conscious of that as they're thinking about donating. And I know, there are a million guidelines for the right way to do that. But I think, we run into some of those issues. So when you get into, let's use an X block from here that was developed by MIT and one that McKinsey Academy contributed, one that, Bob in Ohio threw in there, you need to really figure out the workflow of those things. And I think it's something to consider. Yeah.
Since you asked the question about how to get started, and I would say the most important thing is none of the technology, but rather having a compelling curriculum and really thinking about what you want your students to learn. Thinking about it from that perspective is probably the number one thing. The other part, once you have that, the other parts are a lot easier, and you can do something that, if it has a compelling curriculum and you're worried about what the students are learning, you can do some things in a very basic way. And of course, there is this arms race around production, where production levels have been getting higher and higher by certain, universities like mine and others. But if you're just getting started, you don't need all of that to at least make those inroads.
I could add that, I obviously agree with everyone that the technology is absolutely seamless. It literally takes 5 minutes to learn how to use edX. And I've trained personally all our professors in it. The big challenge is in creating the content, and the even bigger challenge is in teaching the course. Because as we all know, teaching online, it's very different than teaching in a classroom. In a classroom, you can interact with people and keep their attention. When it's online, you need to be super persuasive and creative in how to keep them in the course and how to make sure that they go through the lectures or videos or quizzes and so on, and they complete, all right? So for us, what we have found quite useful is to integrate Open edX with some other technologies like Adobe Connect, where we do weekly virtual meetings with people as a way to engage them, as a way to give them an opportunity to have real-time interaction with the professors. And that, in a way, substitutes a lot of the in-person interaction, at the same time opens the incredible opportunity to be able to talk to people all over the world at the same time about one single subject, which is absolutely mind-blowing to have like all these people with different cultures that are talking about the same thing. So technology is perfect. That's what I can say. But teaching is something that you really need to work hard on.
From organizational perspective, I know from Columbia and at McKinsey, do you have your own in-house experts that are developing these X blocks or installing the technology, or is that more so outsourced to companies like IBL and others?
So as I said, at George Washington University, we outsourced it, but
So we, when McKinsey Academy first started, we were, tightly linked with a rather large development team at edX, who, did a lot of the initial work, the initial extensive and awesome work. Right now, we do not have any in-house developers. We work with companies like IBL and OpenCraft and Arborsoft and Extension Engine. I mean, there's a sea of amazing, talented companies out there, and oftentimes they'll collaborate together on projects. And then, we keep a very close eye on what edX is releasing, and if it makes sense from a learning objectives perspective, we'll oftentimes integrate it. It's important to note that front end that I showed you earlier is an entirely separate thing that sits on top of Open edX, so, and talks with Open edX. For any Green Lantern fans, I know there are some, it's called Apros, and, has its own challenges as well, but provides the learner experience and the content delivery that we want.
At Columbia, we do have, the group that I belong to has, 35 full-time employees, and a lot of the work we do in this area is for the residential courses. We do have the capacity to build interactive features inside the MOOCs, but for the most part, we have used the edX platform as is, using some of the standard tools that are there. And then we'll embed certain things that we bring in from other sources. Therefore, spending less time on coding that we have to do specifically for any one activity. And we're looking at adding more of that kind of work into edX, but many of those importing them from other sources.
Hi, just to touch on the importance that you mentioned about creating compelling course content, can you guys share some thought on how educators can use the idea of open source to generate more compelling content, just like developers use open source to create better software?
You must have something.
Thank you. Well, it's funny that when we talk about learning nowadays, there are connections made to learning theories where often the social aspect of learning is mentioned, and it's become almost in vogue to say that learning is social, and so the platforms need to provide ways for students to interact and the discussion forums and so on, and this has been emphasized more lately than before. But we don't talk about the social aspects of teaching. How it doesn't make entire sense to have, for example, I teach fluid mechanics, and to have the 200 engineering schools across the country teaching a different fluid mechanics course, and each professor inventing and reinventing the wheel and designing their course from scratch each and every time. And often the publishers, the textbook publishers, have tried to lessen that effort by coming up with more and more expensive textbooks, of course, because their goal is the revenue that they can get from that weakness in the system. But there is no reason why we couldn't collaborate, not among the 200 engineering schools, I'm making that number up, but perhaps across 5 or 6 teachers of fluid mechanics that have a vision that is aligned, or have in a way that they can indeed build from each other. We try to do that in my open course, the Practical Numerical Methods with Python, and I did invite a couple of other people that I knew that were teaching similar courses elsewhere, and there was collaboration, there was some joint development of materials. But of course, it wasn't entirely even, and I was leading that project. Like in open source, there is a need to create links among the people who are interested in a particular project, and that part, the community building part, requires effort as well. I think that the old saying in business is you do business with the people that you like, or something. It goes something like that, and it's like that as well in academia. You get to know somebody and you like them, and you have similar ways of looking at something, and you agree that you can work together. We haven't emphasized doing that in teaching. The way that I am doing that more and more with my network is actually using GitHub. And with the same mechanics that I described earlier, I can create a lesson, put it on GitHub, and in addition to building community, that platform gives us a language to collaborate, where somebody can make a copy of my lectures or my notes or my programs or assignments, make some changes, and potentially contribute those changes back to my repository. And it turns out that that platform was made for collaboration, and it does work. It does, because it gives us that structure of how, what is allowed, what is the etiquette of sending somebody a contribution or the etiquette of reporting a bug through an issue posted on the repository. That actually works, and we are increasingly using that platform for that. But you have to find the people to work with.
So I just want to talk about this a little bit from edX's perspective and from my perspective, my role at edX. You know, I mentioned in my presentation, I see my role a lot as trying to foster collaboration within the community, and I want to find the opportunities. Like this topic in particular is one that's of great interest to a lot of different people, and there exists right now, there's a group, the Campus Applications Working Group, that edX is facilitating, but does not own in any particular way. It's a group of people in the Open edX community who are all interested in things related to campus applications, on-campus learning, and things like that. But content reuse is a very specific topic that group is talking about right now. So an example of how that is sort of coming across in the discussions is, so MIT right now, Peter Pinch isn't here, he's Director of Engineering at MIT. He's been doing some great work, created an application called Lore, and this is really to solve a problem that MIT specifically wants to solve internally, that is making pieces of content that they use in their courses individually discoverable. You can search and find different videos on different topics that you might make sense between classes and things like that. But there's no reason why that couldn't grow into something that was, federating content across universities as well. So that's the cornerstone of something that's already built, and the conversations that are happening around it, and sort of what edX is trying to do to make the connections around that piece of software. That's not the whole solution. That's just one thing that's happening. But it's something that is just a hot topic, I think, in general, and we're trying to experiment to find what the right thing is. And I think also from a technical perspective, Open edX sees its role is trying to determine the right formats, right? So Open edX has a format called OLX, right? And this is how a course is defined, as the structure of a course. And it's in a sort of alpha stage. It does enough for what the Open edX platform needs right now, but it's not a formal standard. It's not approved by some external committee. It hasn't been fleshed out. All of the corners haven't been filled in. But that's something that we're looking to do in the next year. I think it's going to be really important to achieving the sort of dream of content reuse that we see, the possibilities there.
So that's a great question, and it has, I think, a number of different layers. Compelling curriculum, I think, is different than compelling assets and content. And Columbia participates in a program around open syllabus and the generation and capturing and collecting of syllabi. And so that's where maybe the curriculum is defined. It's a very creative act, and therefore sometimes it's hard to get those syllabi from faculty. On the content side, I think the comment I had about putting our assets into Creative Commons is one way to make assets available. And our interest in, for example, in the Eric Foner class, his textbook on American history is the textbook of choice for all AP classes in the United States. And what we want to have happen is that teachers throughout the country are able to use the videos that he has that are all chunked into very small segments, and that those teachers will use them to help them teach the AP course. And in schools that don't have a history teacher who can do that AP course, that maybe there is some other way to address that issue. I think it's something that has a lot of work to be done, and we want Columbia, and our interest has been to participate in this as much as we can, not only from the thinking about it, but also putting things out there that people can reuse in that way.
The fact that the videos are online and all the content is online provides a lot of flexibility. You could easily reference other content like video on YouTube or elsewhere and credit them as part of the course, or a number of links and so on. Now, what we've developed during the past 2 years is a collaborative community of teachers and assistants of assistants. So in a way, for a course like this, first of all, it's very hard to create a course by one single person. It's such a big project. It takes 10 times more work than a classroom course. So you inevitably need a team of people to develop a course. All right. So that's by default. And then second, even the teaching, when you're teaching thousands of people and have to answer their questions or discussions or follow up, you can't physically do it by yourself. Like when I did my first course, I had 27,000 people, and literally every day I would get thousands of posts, so it was driving me crazy, So, you need to find a team of people that help you answer, that help you interact with people. And ideally, those are either colleagues or volunteers or people from the industry or students who have completed this course or similar related courses in the past, and then you invite them to help you in the course. So in a way, it becomes a community, and that's the beauty of online teaching. It's not just you talking to like a few students in a classroom, all right, being very limiting, but it's you and a large community of people, and everyone contributes with what they can. And in the end of the day, you're surprised most of the time by the variety of outcomes and by the richness of the content and by the impact of the courses and the impact of the teaching, which is really unique and which is much more related to what's happening in the world and has an opportunity to really making a major change in society.
Hi, I'd like to tie together, first off, I'd like to say thank you, edX. Thank you very much. We all appreciate what you're doing. So thank you. Secondly, I'd like to say that it ties together some of Lorena's comments and the comments here. My sense has always been, too, that it would be lovely to have an application where, this is sort of a request, an application where you can merely go without joining, without signing in, without registering, and see content. It would be really nice if you could have an application, I call it edX Lite, where the footprint is smaller, the resources are smaller, it's easier to install, you can go without signing in, and you don't have to be professorially course-oriented. It can be just this one topic that you want to present to the world. I was at Columbia after the tragedy in Ferguson, and I said, my comment was, get edX to put your thoughts about what's happening out there, because it is a platform for conversation, for communication, and it should be something that shouldn't require us to think in terms of a 67 segment course with homeworks and assignments. It should be a communication mechanism also. So if you can lighten the footprint, make it easy to get in and see content, make the content, when I developed something, it was any content can be used anywhere, anytime. Everything was unbundled. So you could see anything you wanted, and teachers could put together any content to create any course they wanted from any course, and any element, and any aspect of any course. Anyway, so just a set of things to ask if that's on the table, or am I dreaming?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that is definitely foremost in our mind, and edX's mission is education for everyone, everywhere. That's our mission statement, and the way to achieve that is really it's not going to be just through the Civil War and Reconstruction courses, and as wonderful as those courses are, it's going to be through those plus smaller things, more sort of daily life topical things. There's a huge spectrum of content and things that people should want to be learning and could be delivered through the platform. The architecture of the platform right now is as kind as Paul was to say how smoothly everything went for them, it is a architecturally complex piece of software. The direction that we're going with it is really trying to decompose it so that you could recompose the bare minimum pieces that you need and deliver that in a smaller environment. And Piotr, our chief scientist, has been doing some work on this, and that's where we want to go architecturally. And it's just we're not there. there might be a beautiful future in which, it's as easy to install as WordPress or something, but that's not where we are right now. And it's really something that we would hope to achieve, but it's also honestly probably something that we're only going to achieve with the participation of a larger community.
Okay, I think we're going to bring the formal part to a close. It's been a long set of presentations, actually, but thank you for your participation. Thank you for Michael and IBL for providing the context for it all.
And thanks you all for your warm attention. Thanks, Paul, for coming from DC. Lorena is also coming from DC. Ivan, thank you very much. Joel is coming from Boston, from Cambridge. Jen, thank you very much for organizing all this. Maurice, and thank you all. We're going to have the next meetup in March or April. We're going to have great presenters. MongoDB, Neuron, probably. Maybe we will try to convince NYU, I don't know. And much more people. Microsoft. And so thank you so much all. We will continue the conversation here, the hashtag. Thank you. Thank you.